Hi, everybody, and welcome to Backstage. To all the people who've been loyal veterans and come in every week and watch, welcome back. And to all the new ones that are here, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate this. I want to give a special shout out to all the folks who've taken time to write in to tell us how much you've enjoyed this. That really makes a difference because there's a lot of people behind the scenes that are putting it together. And you know what? We read all those things for sure. And I'm excited about those of you who are using the Backstage as part of your lesson plans. What a neat thing to think of to have your students be able to meet all these icons in person and have time with them. And of course, there's the whole backlog of these great videos that you can share with them as well. So thanks a lot. We always have special guests, and if we always have special guests, we don't need a word like special, right? But our guest today is a great friend. Dr. Clinton is the vice president of the Midwest Clinic Board of Directors. He brings to the table a stellar career of teaching and administration. So welcome. What is going on in Norman, Oklahoma, Dr. Clinton?
All good things are happening here. Tim, we've got beautiful weather. I don't know how that happens in Oklahoma. It doesn't happen very often, but as I tell people, if it were like this all the time, I couldn't afford to live here. But really good. Things are very nice, and we're having a wonderful time in Oklahoma.
That's great. My friend, would you give us a short background of your professional journey?
Sure, happy to do so. My first degree, bachelor's degree, was from East Central University, which is in Ada, Oklahoma, small liberal arts college. Wonderful place for someone like me to get a bachelor's degree in music education with the plan of being a band director. As a matter of fact, I actually taught my first year, a junior in college. It was just a strange situation. The Vietnam War was on hand, and band directors were being drafted, going to the National Guard, all that sort of thing. So there were a few of us that went to teach in a very small community outside of Ada. So we taught half-time, paid as custodians, which hasn't changed significantly. We were paid that way. And then we went back and took a full load at East Central. So I had my baptism by fire right there and I learned also why I needed a college degree. I needed to learn a lot after that first year of teaching. That was really important. So I came up to Norman to do my student teaching, even though I had been, teaching for a year. I came up to do my student teaching, and I was the beginning band director. I taught 6 elementary schools, team taught high school, team taught at the junior high school, taught 1 band at the high school, and taught about 25 lessons per week. That's just what was expected, and that's what we did. Eventually, I went to University of Oklahoma and got my master's degree in music education. And very shortly thereafter, I went to the University of North Texas and got my PhD. And this is typical for me, just a strange thing that happened. My degree is in music education with emphasis in string pedagogy. I'm a band director. Also in orchestral conducting with Anshel Brusloff, and sociology. I couldn't decide where I was going and what I was going to do, so I ended up doing all of those things.
So tell us about okay, you come from your PhD, what do you go back? Where's the teaching now?
Well, when I came back to Norman, actually, when I was in Norman, I was the band and orchestra director at the beginning level. Then I went to a junior high school, actually. And Jackie Dillon, a name that you know and a lot of people know very well, actually, she came to me and said, "John, you're going to be the new band and orchestra director at Central Junior High." I said, "No, Jackie, I don't know anything about orchestra. I can't do that." On the 3rd trip, she did everything but take me by the ear and give me the contract and said, "You're now that person." So that was my entrance into the orchestral field. Jackie was with me every day. I went over to her house 3 times a week to study all the different string instruments. Did that for 2 years. She was just phenomenal. And then after that 1 year, John Morgan left the high school. And so I went to Norman High School as the band and orchestra director. Did that for, I don't know, 20 some odd years. And at the same time, I was selected to be the supervisor of music. So I did band and orchestra, supervisor of music, a little bit of everything. And this just goes on. It's just a crazy career because shortly thereafter, well, I want to mention there's a guy named Robert Lee Kidd III. And Bob was the former supervisor, and he helped me through some of the things at the very beginning. But at the same time, I was trying to figure out what to do, how to do, when to do all these things that were coming at me. So I eventually decided to drop the band because as much as I loved doing that, marching band took such a significant time away from the administration, made it difficult. So I did that for a long, long time. And then eventually, if you're interested in further information, I went to the University of Central Oklahoma and opened up a program called Oklahoma A+ Schools and the Oklahoma Center for Arts Education. Did that for 2 or 3 years, raised a ton of money because I had to support my program. There was no support in terms of financial stuff coming from UCO. So I did that, raised a lot of money, several $100,000 to make sure that that worked. Eventually, the dean of the college in January took a new position down in Texas as a provost. They asked me to be the interim dean. What do I know about interim dean? So, fool that I am, I said yes. Within, they were offering the position, interviews and so forth. They asked me to do that. And then for the last 10, 12 years of my career as an educator on a day-to-day basis, I was the dean of the College of Fine Arts and Design at the University of Central Oklahoma. And that's enough.
That's pretty storied, all right. That's for sure. I know that a lot of people watching this are somewhere along the way may think about going into some kind of administration, and you're one of our consumer clinicians that spends a lot of time there. Was it baptism by fire, or did you grow up thinking you wanted to be a dean of a college?
First of all, I never had a position except for my first one as a big band director that I even knew existed, much less wanted. And it just wasn't part of what I knew. I came from a small town and things just kept coming up and coming up. When I came to Norman, one of the first big things was I had to buy slacks, because I had jeans all, so I had to buy slacks, I had to buy dress clothes and all that sort of thing. It was a real baptism by fire for me to go into that. The training that I got was from Bob Kidd, and he was a terrific educator in every possible way. But he took me into his office, showed me all of his files. He was highly organized. And he had one little bitty tiny file that had 4 or 5 papers in it and said, these are the things I couldn't figure out where they went in the file system. Good luck.
Wow.
Yes, it was, you jump in the river and just keep, paddling downstream. So yeah, it was baptism by fire.
What skills, talents, knowing, knowledge, wisdom did you pull over from teaching into administration? So you'd be, and we all know you were very successful there. What was that balance?
Well, it was fascinating because there's not a whole lot of difference except in volume. When you're in the music teaching field, especially at the secondary level, you're responsible for students, you're responsible for budget, you're responsible for working with parents, with the community. It's just the volume takes over. And it's just so much more to do. And every decision you make affects so many lives. And so the caution that you can decision and how you communicate those things that you're trying to get across to all the faculty, know that if students, the community, it's just, the volume just became incredible. I'll give you an example. Like most people, I wrote up goals and I wrote up objectives. Here's what I want to do. Here's how I want to do it. the day went so fast that I didn't have a chance. The phone calls, the meetings, excuse me, I'm going to try not to say anything about that, but particularly there were so many meetings, and I would sit there and just try my best to focus on what they were talking about, even though it had so little to do with what we were doing. That was very, very difficult. And so what I ended up doing, which was probably not the most healthy thing, but every night when I would come home, I would lay in bed and I would go through the whole day, hour by hour, minute by minute, and say, okay, here's what you did that was good. Here's what you should have done. Here's what was not good. Okay, go back tomorrow and fix these things. Go ahead and make these things work for you, and just do your best to make it happen. And that was a daily thing for probably 15, 20 years, to the point that it's so hard for me to go to sleep at night now. I just can't settle down because I go through the day and decide what I could and couldn't do.
Yeah.
And I want to mention to you also that, there was a lot of pressure here in Norman because the band at the high school had been to Midwest, performed wonderfully. The orchestra had performed at Midwest, performed wonderfully. Later on, a chorus that we had at the high school level was auditioned for and invited to perform on NPR at From the Top. So these people really knew what they were doing. They knew the process, they knew what to do and how to do it. And I was sitting there just trying to help them out the best I knew how to do.
Were you in the hiring process for the teachers in the schools?
Yes, I was. The thing, it worked out really well because particularly for the band, orchestra, and choral folks, I was the one who did the initial evaluation of all the people who came in to interview. And then I would take them to the principal. Now, over the years, I had spent a lot of time gaining a working relationship with the principals because they're the ones that actually could have said anything and I would have said, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And that would have been it. But they depended upon me to bring them good people on the final interviews. And then we would sit down and talk about all those people. And I never overrode them and they never overrode me. And we came to a consensus and said, this is the person. Now, when I eventually became the director of fine arts and art education, all the stuff, the theater, dance, everything was involved. That was a trickier situation because they weren't sure, as the teachers weren't either, whether I knew anything about art, whether I knew anything about dance or theater. And I'll tell you, I had studied hard to make sure. I even went to some classes, to learn how those people think, what they do, how they see. It's different than music altogether. And so I wanted to find out. So eventually I was able to keep that same relationship with the principals and do the same process for the time that I was there.
A question that always comes up, could you tell very soon if the person was going to be successful or not in the interview?
Yes. I don't think there's any question about it. When they come in and it's not overconfidence, it's not ego, but there's a confidence that you can get from them and what they say and how they say it, that you say they want to be here, which is really important. They're going to follow what our process is, even though they have other ideas and new ideas that we need to incorporate in what we're doing. But this is the person. And 9 times, over the years, I've probably interviewed 2,000, 3,000 people. And that's 44 years worth of administration. Yeah. So yes, and I've missed sometimes, and I've always paid the price for that too, because making that decision with the principal means when they called me and said, this is not working out, and I would know that it wasn't working out, I'm the guy. Yeah. I get to do the evaluation. I get to help them to move on to another place, and all the wonderful things that happen with that.
Yes. I'm going to put 2 words in front of you and just comment on them because you see it from all perspectives. The first word is content. The second word is context.
Okay, those are two interesting words. First of all, content without context does not exist. Context without content does not exist. To say that one is more important than the other is not true, in my opinion. They are equal, but they have to be done in a certain way at a certain time. For example, the content has to fit the students if you're a teacher. And, and my job was to help the teachers with that content. And that has to do with selection of music, what's appropriate for those students, help them to develop quality music. You know, there's lots of music out there and some of it's really good. Some of it's not so good. And so to help them to do that and to help them with the students learn that starting here, the next step in the content is going to be gradually become more and more. And then context. It's a relationship with the students that provides value to the students. One of the things that was interesting about Norman is that it was difficult to program for those string students because anything other than the classics or contemporary classics, what are you doing, Dr. Clinton? You know, we need to be playing these things. We need to be doing these things. And so while we would dip off into some other areas occasionally, just for the audience sake and for programming's sake, we made sure the context was elevate the value and what would elevate the audience value of who we were working with. So those two things go hand in hand, but together they can make it positive things. And here's one quick example. I talked to you about the high school person, Tony Gonzalez was his name, dynamite teacher, who started at a mid-high for us. And he was in the mid-high that was lower socioeconomic, middle, and maybe a little bit lower than that. And those kids, you know, it's pretty tough change to have this dynamic teacher come in and do stuff with them. After 2 or 3 years, they started a thing called Mozart classics. And those students, and I know they did because it's still going on, as a matter of fact, after he left there, he put those kids in tuxes and tails and long black dresses, and they did Mozart, and they did really not just Mozart, but wonderful music. And I went up to this one boy that he was about 6'3", he was in the 9th grade, big old boy, and I knew him, and he was a tough kid. And why he got into chorus was always beyond us, but he just needed something to do. And I asked him why it was going. He says, he just kind of buckled up his tuxedo and he says, "Look at me now. Man, I know what I'm doing. I'm somebody. We're singing Mozart. What do you think about that, sir?" And it was just like, okay, he got the content right. Took him a couple of years, I know. And he got the context right because those kids saw value in what they were doing. Can't go wrong with that sort of thing happens.
Don't you think a music teacher has a lot of opportunity to change lives for the better?
No question about it. I have mentioned this to you before, but I have a younger brother who just retired as a band director in Alabama. And one of these things he started was at the end of every rehearsal. You know, he was talking about the football players think they're somebody, the cheerleaders think they're somebody, all these different groups, academics think they're somebody, but he just started them and he told them they were somebody. And at the end of every rehearsal, he gives a signal and they say, "Be somebody." They're going to be somebody. Pretty special.
Yeah, it really is. This is great. Tell me how important for your teachers and for the people that you worked with when you were a dean and so forth, even the people you were fundraising with and making money for the university. Here's the word: communication.
Oh boy. How many hours can we talk? But I'll do this quickly. Communication is the key. It is, and I don't know quite how to put this in sequence, so pardon me if I put it out of order a little bit, but you have to communicate honestly, with integrity, and you must communicate often. not through email necessarily, not through text, not through Twitter. That's some things you can do to avoid meetings, which I'm all for. You can do some things like that to meetings. But if you're going to go, and this is an old story for all teachers, you always compliment in public. So I would go to meetings and point people out and say, good work, here's what you did. And in private, you do the other side. That's when you do the stuff that's difficult to do. But communication, every day, every moment, every opportunity you have to work with funders, to work with teachers, to work with students, to work with parents, you got to take that opportunity. And yes, the paper piles up on your desk like crazy, but you just still got to answer the phone. You still got to go out into the schools and be with the folks. You just have to do that. You have to communicate.
Yeah, that's what the great teachers do. Tell us about your book. You got a little bestseller out there that's filling a caveat that's needed in the administrative world. Talk to us. What's the book about?
Well, you're very nice to say that about that. I owe so much to you and to so many people in my family and others about this book. The title of the book is Embracing Administrative Leadership in Music Education, published by GIA, and it's been terrific. You know, well, you and I have talked a lot over the years, and we've been on the plane a lot over the years, and we would talk about administration. And one time you said, you ought to write this down. And I said, no, I don't have any idea how to write anything down like this. You know, what am I doing? Well, that went on for about 4 years. And this is the true story. My daughter from Texas came to Norman for Christmas holidays. She saw a note from you on my computer, and she answered it as if it were me. And she said, I'm ready to go. So I was obligated to write this book because I had no choice after that. And so I began, and this book, I want to be really clear about this book. If you're looking for a book on philosophy or strategic planning, as much as I believe in that, I think it's important, don't buy this book. If you're interested in leadership, and if you're interested in what the day-to-day situations are, how that works, why it works, what you might do, if you're interested in how to develop a budget, working with personnel, hiring and firing, I hate to say that word always, but all of those different things that you have to do, then this book will be something that hopefully would help you, because it is something that just came from, well, I'd even talk to my teachers. I said, tell me what I did. Tell me what happened. You mean you didn't remember that this happened and this happened and this happened? And so some of the things were difficult topics to write about. Some of them were positive and easy. And, you know, we have an all-city concert here where we bring together 1,000 fifth graders for one concert, choral group. We bring in the top children's educators in the United States, and they just do dynamite work with them. We have an all-city band with 1,000 kids. We have an all-city orchestra, all-city chorus. I wrote up in that book how we developed all the different things, the evaluation process, how to select things. It's all in that book. So I'm hopeful that that book is helpful, and evidently people have been very kind about it. The reviews have been excellent. And there's a guy named Rick Coulter who uses it in his classes every summer. And he's so good to write to me and send me what the students said about the book, and makes my day. It's just wonderful.
It really is a remarkable blueprint and has helped a lot of people who didn't even know which direction to turn. So
Thank you.
we're ready for book 2 whenever you're ready.
Would you let me know what I should write about?
I'll get to Katie and we'll make sure.
Yeah, Katie will help you out. That's true.
I got a couple quick questions here to wrap it up. We're living in some most unusual times, certainly, and it's raining on everybody right now.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for those teachers out there right now as they crawl up the side of the mountain?
The advice, I think the thing of it is that it's both good and bad, because it's a universal problem, which, and this is, hang here with me, which means it's also universally good, because you have to communicate. You have to talk to people. You have to experiment. You have to look at different ways of presenting the same material maybe that you presented before. Um, MEJ, I just finished the latest MEJ, a wonderful article by Bob Morrison and Scott Edgar, I think it was, about social emotional intelligence. Man, what a treat that was to read through that article. It's just terrific. I even saw some things on NPR that are for educators to how to help you through this process. You have to talk to people. People, there's on the internet, there's string groups, there's band groups, there's choral groups, and all of them are dealing with the same thing. So have this opportunity to try something new and fresh that may actually, when things settle down next year, 2 years, 3 years from now, you want to come back and say, hey, that worked. That worked really well. And so I can incorporate that in what I'm doing right now. So it's easy for me to say as a retired person, but I am working with some people, and trying to help them to understand what we might do and go through this process. I think that there's some good that's going to come from this. Have patience. Know that your administration is doing the very best that they can, even though you may not like what's coming down. Even in Norman, we're going back from, everybody go to school. Okay, can't go to school. Now we've got to go back and do virtual. It's just back and forth a lot. So it's a tough situation for them, and I understand that.
Well, I think the worst thing people can do is turn their back and just hope it's going to get better.
You just can't. Even myself, who technologically really struggles, with things, I've gone in and tried various things, and my goodness, what's out there is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. Okay, here's the last question, and this is obviously because Conselmer, I mean, you're part of our family, and what is the importance, not just this time, but all the time, for music education and music industry to work together? What's the advantage? What's the benefit?
Oh, there's so many advantages to that. And I'm going to give you a big one already, and that's the Conselmer Stimulus Program.
Mm.
Man, that knocked me out. And I sent that to everybody that I knew and said, man, you ought to take advantage of this. This is an opportunity, to do this thing. But for music educators to not work with their local dealers, for them not to work with the manufacturers, the publishers, all these different people is a huge mistake, because they can't be successful unless we're working with them.
Yes.
If you're making bad Bach trumpets, I need to call you. Now,
Yes.
You're not making bad Bach trumpets, you're making great Bach trumpets. That happens to be my instrument, and that's where I got it. And it's a great instrument. But you have to be in contact with that. And I'm sure that all the music dealers are really interested in input from the music educators. It's so critical to how the whole of it works. You can't work without students. You can't work without administrators. You can't work without parents or community. You can't work without the local dealer, and you can't work without music industry. Pull that all together, you've got something really special that would happen.
Yeah, that's really good synergy. And whether this pandemic has made that louder or whatever, I think it's one thing we need to sew up and make sure is true forever when we get on the other side of this.
It's an opportunity.
It really is. It really is an opportunity. Well, thank you. It goes fast, I told you. Thank you, and thanks for all you do, and thanks for making sure Holly will be president of the United States someday. His granddaughter that is like at the front of the pack for sure.
Well, I'm going to live long enough to see that happen.
It could happen any day.
That's right.
And I know we're going to keep having you as one of our clinicians because everybody loves you, but will you promise to come back and be on Backstage again sometime with us?
And this is such a wonderful thing for me to see you and speak with you. And if I'm of some help, I'm just happy as I can be. So thank you very much for having me here.
Well, thank you. Best love to you and to Becky and to all the people who are listening in. This was a grand slam today, wasn't it? Thank you. We'll see you next time at Backstage. Until then, stay healthy.